Hello, everybody. Welcome again. I know you're starting to get used to our faces here, but this time we are going to be going through another one of the DNA, two of the DNA panels. This is series part 4, where we've done 2 each a series. We were doing starting from the top when you do our panels. We're going through all of those right now. We're at the hormone and the immune panels. So we're going to be going through that today with our slides here. And we'll talk a lot about some products that we've been using for these things, as well as some of the genes and how to read through this panel. We have Derek with us today, the DNA specialist. A lot of you guys have already talked to him. He does do the consultations as well. A lot of them, at least I know he does, because he's got that. Him and Madeline have a lot of, it's all up there with them. In fact, she actually helped me today with the PowerPoint that we're going to have up here. So shout out to her for the PowerPoint. But let's get right started. And if you have any questions, do not forget to put them into the Q&A there, especially the Q&A one. That one I know at the end of this, we always go through that and we'll have email sent out to you if we didn't answer your question live, because at the end, we're going to try to answer your questions live. I know last time we went a little bit over on time, so we weren't able to go through as many of your questions that you guys had. So we did have to send a lot of those by email, but up in the chat box there, we do see the ones in the chat box too. Like I have those pulled up so I can see those as well. We'll answer those as we get them. So put them up in there. We'll answer your questions. So keep in mind, don't worry if you don't get your question answered today, but we'll try to be as in-depth as we can. So we'll get started here. Let me share my screen with you guys for the DNA. And voila. Oh, also, you guys will see Jack Tips. He's our clinical advisor here. He's also in the chat. So if you guys need to ask Jack any questions too, he's another person that can answer a lot of your questions. Here we are. So, like I said, today is going to be the hormone management and the immune system panels. And we love this one. However, I would say that this would be one of the more, there's a lot going on, because the immune system and hormones, right? Those are probably the most dynamic systems. Whereas, when we go through the neurology panel, it's pretty much like, oh, you got this issue here. This is what we do. This one's got a lot more moving pieces to it. And you'll see that there's a lot of, there's interleukins, TNF1s, and then they have like a number next to them. There's a lot of them. So we've taken all that into account. And so when we go through your DNA, when you send us your results, Derek goes through that, and he always has something good to say. He knows a lot about those genes.
And the thing with having complex systems like this is that they tend to touch everything. So if you have bad hormones or hormone systems, you'll tend to have a lot more health problems than just would be like recognizable just as merely a hormone. Like your symptom not as like, oh, I have bad hormone management. Mm-hmm. It's actually some other issue that actually is physically showing up. But I'm sure most of us at one point were teenagers, or maybe even have teenagers, so we're familiar with how powerful hormones are. They are chemical messengers that regulate body functions. And when they are imbalanced, they cause all kinds of problems like thyroid problems, weight problems, even infertility or fatigue. These are probably one of the things that probably most people show up to clinics for. Like, I just don't feel good. That's probably the best thing I could say that people will come up and ask. Like,
we're always trying to find a balance.
Yeah.
In the industry I came from, there's a lot of people that were taking testosterone, because more is always better, right? And you find out later in life that one of them specifically can't have kids, made him sterile, but I mean, he was taking so many. But we're always trying to find a balance. And so this is what this panel is going to help us do, is figure out.
The balance is always best. So let's go ahead. Yeah. So our first trait within the hormone management panel is cortisol imbalance. Cortisol is super important. It's made by the adrenal glands, and it is essentially your stress hormone. It helps your fight or flight response, and it regulates tons of systems within the body: blood sugar, inflammation, blood pressure, sleep, even your mood. And that's why people will come and say, I'm really tired. And it's like, are they tired because their cortisol is too high or because it's too low. But either direction, we have genes that help regulate these processes. And if you have certain mutations within those genes, your cortisol levels might not respond the way you would like them to. Just as a quick spotlight, we have 3 genes highlighted here. The CRHR1 gene, which encodes a receptor that triggers activation of the HPA axis, FKBP5, which regulates glucocorticoid receptors involved in stress response, and SH2B3. Mutations in this cellular regulator gene can contribute to autoimmune adrenal insufficiency. So, yeah, these ones are starting to look like jumbles of letters and numbers, and that's because it took a long time to figure this stuff out. Most of these are pretty new, and so they don't have more of the old classical 1990s names for things.
Mm-hmm. I really like this. See, I've used this one a lot in, when haven't you ran into somebody who's got something wrong with the HPA axis? One of the most common things that I see, right? And we obviously look at it through the lens of the microbiome and genetics. And so we have these genes here, and we know, okay, someone might be more sensitive to stress because their HPA axis is not regulated, and this gene is one of the reasons. And so what I've seen a lot of times is people even mistaking things as, let's say, maybe even pre-diabetes, or somebody who's like, oh, that my friend, he eats sugar before bed and he wakes up, and there's a lot of things that cortisol does when you're asleep. Someone's trying to get a full night's sleep and they have really low blood sugar, cortisol will spike to get that blood sugar released, and then it can wake you up in the middle of the night, which isn't fun. And so some of the stuff that we do is more than just, okay, cortisol, so we need something that's going to de-stress you. Obviously we want that, but there's other things too, because it's hormones that interact with each other, right? Maybe we'll look at blood sugar too, because it'll affect cortisol. Maybe we'll look at things like amodin, which is, I think, one of the ingredients that Shane's going to be using soon. I think it's from rhubarb, that will basically blunt that cortisol response. And for us, when you see somebody with this cortisol imbalance, obviously we'll give you recommendations in there for your genes, but we can also do protocols that also utilize the hormone products, plus we have the prebiotics and probiotics. So I've seen a lot of people get different salivary, they'll do like the 4-point salivary test for cortisol, and just doing the neuros, right? The neuro eubiomic, the neuro superfood, and normally we add 3 more and try to do more genetic stuff. Just those 2 alone, though, are able to balance out some of these people's problems with their cortisol imbalances.
And talking with practitioners, would you say that you see cortisol being too high or too low most of the time?
I'd say 80 to 90% of the time we're seeing it too high. And so that's where we want to go into the mystery of see, like, why is that high?
Yeah. And so that's where it's like they're basically burnout is essentially like the non-technical term. Like, you're running at a high stress level all the time, and your adrenal glands essentially kind of burn out and either will stop producing it. That's more advanced if you ignore it for a long time. Mostly what we want to do is keep those cortisol levels under control. So yeah, the next trait we have is DHEA deficiency. It's a DHEA is another hormone. You may see it a lot on products promoting brain health. That's because it does interact with the brain function a lot, especially during development, but also as adults. It also touches many other things, like we said, all hormones seem to do. They touch memory problems, fatigue, osteoporosis, and even erectile dysfunction, low libido. So lots of things. Here again, we've just listed 3 genes. Now, keep in mind, each one of these panels on average have about 10 different mutations that we highlight. We're just trying to do more common ones or some of the more interesting ones. In this case, HHEX is a gene. It's just a transcription factor where mutations in it are lower DHEA levels. The other one is a CYP2C9. This is a metabolism gene. Anytime you see CYP, that's kind of a keyword for metabolism. And in this case, the metabolism of DHEA. Mutations in this gene lead to reduced circulating levels of DHEA. And then TRIM4 is a gene identified in the balance of DHEA to cortisol. So essentially, again, this one's the opposite of cortisol, wherein people don't have enough DHEA.
And DHEA is like, I almost compare DHEA to like bees, because bees, they all have these genes, right? And when a queen bee is in its cell, if you feed it royal jelly, it comes out a queen. But if you feed it bee bread and honey, right, it becomes a different thing all alone, right? Or like a full different, like a drone bee or a, any different bee really, right? Because they're all getting different things, right? It's all coming from the same benchmark, right? So DHA is one of them that's known as a good precursor one. So a lot of males will take it for the conversion to testosterone, and that's where this test comes in handy, especially for things that we'll see later, right? A big word that you hear in this industry is aromatase, right? That's one of those. If you look at like the biochemical pathway of how DHA converts and all these different things, estradiol, so on and so forth, we're going to look at that entire piece. This specifically is DHEA. So if you're seeing it's, low or high, right? Usually the commonality is like it's too low. And so I know if you guys look into our, like, was it Calm? The new Calm has, or it's the old Calm. One of them has DHEA in it. I know for a fact the old one does. The new one might too. But DHEA is available on the market. But if you want to know ways to raise DHA naturally, we can look into that too with this and the recommendations that you get. You call your rep, talk to Derek. We'll be able to obviously individualize it a little bit more, because usually it's a lot more complicated than just here, take this, especially for hormones. We want to kind of balance things out with the things that we give you and recommend to you.
Okay, so our next one is probably one of the most common, I would say, concerns among people that come to us is estrogen and progesterone imbalance. Obviously, these are key sex hormones, primarily made in the ovaries, but there are small amounts produced in the adrenal glands, fat tissues, and other places. Estrogens generally support female reproductive health, while progesterone regulates menstruation and supports pregnancy. Hormone levels naturally change through over age, as you age, different activity levels, what you eat. So again, they're very regulated, but you can also tend to mess them up pretty easily. Generally, if you are overweight, you'll have higher estrogen levels. Again, it just said that it's produced by fat tissues. Within our panel, we highlight one of the estrogen receptor genes, ESR1. It's a major regulator of all downstream effects of estrogen. CYP, remember, that's one of our metabolism genes. So CYP1A1 metabolizes estradiol into a genotoxic form. Mutations can increase levels of the detoxification pathway intermediates. And PGR, which is a progesterone receptor, mediates the physiological responses to progesterone. So again, this one is very important. I think this is probably one of the key things that people, again, come in and have problems with, wouldn't you say?
PCOS. It's probably, and this is actually really cool. I have a specific example of this where we've looked at somebody's DNA and it was totally different than what they thought was happening, because when they do their blood work, they thought that person had too much estrogen, when in reality, that person was actually making too much testosterone. And obviously, we're ignoring progesterone here, but the estrogen was really high because all that testosterone was converting over to the high estrogen, which led to more problems from there too. So we were able to see that hiccup in the genes and be like, well, actually, we're looking at it here rather than just the downstream thing, which is why I actually really like when practitioners will combine blood work with the DNA, because, the river runs, pretty far down before you get your disease state, right? But when you look back at the beginning where the water's coming out, you can see in your DNA, you basically think of the DNA as like the dam where the water's coming out. You kind of figure out why that water came out by looking at the DNA and being, okay, well, for instance, that cytochrome gene, the CYP one, right? We see a lot of that with, if somebody had a really bad, and there's a class of those, right? That's just one of them. PLONS one is another one, the plastic, right?
Oh, yeah.
Plastics in the system. And these plastics, as estrogen, some of them 10 times more than a regular, you know what I'm saying? And so these genes, these metabolism genes, these cytochrome genes, if you're someone like, let's say you had a really strong cytochrome gene, I had a really meh one, if I was getting plastics, exposed to plastic and stuff, I would have a much worse effect from getting plastics in my body than him, because his cytochrome genes are getting rid of them. So he's not having problems, whereas I can't. So we also look into those genes as well for that. And so the combination of products that we would use is something like detoxigenic, which can upregulate those metabolism genes. And then we'd use the hormonogenic to do a lot of the stuff that has to do with conversion of hormones. A lot of them are basically from the brassica class, like you'll see in the market, DIM, Chrysin, a lot of those, what are the isothiocyanates, I think is the long word for them. Shane's got them in clinical doses and puts them in the hormonogenic in a specific formula so that we can manage all that stuff.
And this touches back on the second webinar that we did in this series, going back to the detox pathways. Mm-hmm. They are intricately involved in clearing these estrogens as well. So if you remember, great. This is where this ties back into it. If not, I would suggest going back and looking at that.
Specifically the glucuronidase, that whole process of making glucuronic acid that binds to these and sends them to the colon. And then you can talk to your rep too if you want to know more about how like the microbiome affects that whole process of being able to eliminate them. Because your microbiome can cause problems and cause a hiccup in that whole process of getting rid of excess estrogen when your body's trying to, send them away.
Okay, so we were on more of the female side. Now we'll move more towards the male side of the hormone equation. So here we have low testosterone and male infertility are two other traits that we test for. Testosterone, about 1 in 36 men experience low testosterone, and that's a clinically low levels. I would say that a lot more have suboptimal levels of testosterone. Mm-hmm. And that's where having genetic testing can help you figure that out a little more, like why? Like I'm doing everything I should, and why is my testosterone still low? It could just be something's wrong with one of your genes, and so you would need more than what they typically would recommend. We have a few genes here for our spotlights. SHBG regulates the amount of free testosterone in the blood. And if you have an overactive form, it will lower your testosterone. FSHB is the follicle stimulating hormone, and it will signal to produce more testosterone. So if you have a suboptimal form of FSHB, boy, that is a tongue twister, you can have low testosterone and or male infertility problems. And then GSTP1, again, touches both the detox pathways and oxidative stress, which in turn can lead to male infertility as well.
Mm-hmm. And these are, as a man, right, I've been able to dabble into these a lot, with, I don't want to say problems with, but more of like the biohacking side, being a man, we're always all about like, how do we optimize our hormones? I want to feel my best. And a lot of times when I get my blood work back, I'll be like looking at my testosterone, like that doesn't seem low, but I feel tired. Why would this be? And then on my blood work, my sex hormone binding globulin's high. It was higher at the time. I had actually just gotten surgery and I was sick and I was laying around doing nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like eventually catches up to you when you got, 4 weeks of recovering from surgery, right? And that blood work was ironically on like the 5th week. And I hadn't even gotten back to the gym yet, right? So my sex hormone binding globulin's higher, carrying it basically it's what's going to carry things around, right? And if it's all bound up with the sex hormone binding globulin, where's all the free testosterone? So you have testosterone, but it's not as useful. So there's cool things you can do to lower your sex hormone binding globulin so you can free up some testosterone. Same with like the FSHB. That one is a cool one, but there's also another one that we do that's very similar to this that has to do with similar pathways where we'll do the gonadal axis. In there, we try to stimulate luteinizing hormone, right? And actually, I'll give you guys a tip. Ginger, ironically, and you can pull up the actual dose for this by going onto Google Scholar, like typing in like how much ginger. But ginger will raise luteinizing hormone. Some of the common things that you see that raise men's testosterone in the industry, that Tonkat, Shilajit, I think might have some research on luteinizing hormone getting raised. I don't know the doses on them, so you have to check that. But those are 2 cheat codes you can do. We have the M+. These are things that we're using to interact with these genes. That last one is detoxification genes, which you'll see in the detox panel he's talking about. I think GST might be glutathione something, but I don't remember off the top of my head. And so if you need something like that, we have the detoxigenic. We have everything for you in one place. It's just nice that we're going to do the panels for you so that we can pinpoint exactly what's going on, right?
Okay, so that was the last of the hormone management panel. Moving forward to the immune panel. Basically, we have two panels that touch the immune system. This one is called the immune panel. And that's because it kind of touches on the immune system's response to infections and autoimmune diseases. So most of you are aware the immune system defends against infections, but also imbalances can increase the risk of conditions like ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome. But then also we can have immune systems that are maybe a little too vigilant and start to attack ourselves, like lupus, celiac disease, not celiac, I guess Crohn's disease, but celiac is kind of in that as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at a few of those specific traits.
And you'll see in these panels, some of them we threw together. Is technically, like if you're seeing here hypothyroidism and hyper and hypo, those are technically in the panel, two different panels in the same immune panel. But you can pull down the hypothyroidism panel. You can pull down the hyperthyroidism. We just put them in one here because they're the same topic. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, and so this is probably one of the most common issues that we see, I think. Probably more on the hypothyroidism, even though hyperthyroidism is fairly common as well. So if you hear people talk about Graves' disease or Hashimoto's, all these things are issues with your thyroid. A lot of people have pushed towards like synthetic hormone now for that. That's a pretty powerful like step to just like immediately hit. I would recommend trying more natural ways first, and then as a last resort, switching over to those.
We know a lot of the, like, for the longest period of time, it was always, we don't know why you're having Hashimoto's or Graves'. We don't know, or they'll know that your, thyroid peroxidase, your TPO antibodies are high, but they'll be like, well, we'll just monitor it, and then once your thyroid's gone, we'll start giving you the synthetic. Usually they'll try to start with oral first, and then they'll move into, your synthetic thyroid hormones. But now we're getting into the age of this research is all coming out now where we're like, oh, look, we can actually lower TPO antibodies. And a lot of it actually comes down to the genomics.
Yeah, so there are specific genes within each one of these conditions that can really help you pinpoint what is the root cause. And each one may need to be treated a little bit differently. And so here we've highlighted a few. The TSHR gene can lead to overproduction or underproduction. That's why we threw this together. If it has a mutation that makes it more efficient, it can have too much TSH. If it's not efficient enough, you'll have not enough TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, as I should say. So again, it kind of comes back to hormones again a little bit. But then we have the IRGM gene, which regulates recycling of old thyroid cells. So if this process is out of whack, it can lead to autoimmune hyperthyroidism, where you're making too much because the immune system is attacking it. And then we have CTLA4, controls the response of the immune system to thyroid cells, and mutations here can impede that and lead to autoimmune hypothyroidism. And so here's where you can see, like, oh, you have hypothyroidism. Let's just treat you. Actually, the reason you have hypothyroidism is because your immune system is attacking it, not just because you're not producing enough. Mm-hmm. So instead of just kind of like bandaging over, you can find the root cause and maybe try to tamp down your immune system, as opposed to just like patching over it and be like, oh, who cares if it's too low? We'll just keep pumping you full of this. And so that's kind of my thoughts on how to approach these, because they are kind of a yin and yang thing. Like being in the middle is great, and on either side is problematic.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic. The like iodine they now call, and they might have been calling this for a while, but iodine's got this. Was it the Goldilocks? They call it the Goldilocks vitamin, right? Because it's like you want enough, but you don't want too much. And now we're seeing a lot of the new research coming out on, okay, if you have hypothyroidism, you'd think, oh, I need more iodine. And a lot of times they're doing these diets where they're trying to lower the iodine more because they're genetically susceptible. Because if you get too much iodine, you can have problems with this autoimmune popping out. Right. And so we've also, if you look at our panels here, we just went through the hormone one. If someone came to you with, Hashimoto's, Graves' disease, and even the versions that aren't autoimmune, right? If it wasn't autoimmune, you would be able to get a lot of information out of that hormone panel, right? Because that's more about like the TSH conversion hormone, stuff like that. And this one's about, okay, my thyroid is dying because I have my body attacking it. And so you can look at these two panels and kind of take little snippets of information from each of them to be able to pull together this picture and say, okay, this may be what's happening to this person. And then we can, dial in on the supplement and lifestyle and, dietary advice to be able to figure out, okay, now we have something very tangible and very much so like the exact missing puzzle piece that we can stick in here to try to figure out what was going wrong. So, and something I recommend for, any of this autoimmune conditions in general, the immune genic that we carry, when Shane formulated that, it covers almost every autoimmune condition that I can think of. Because like if you think hypothyroidism, the big thing that you're thinking about for the autoimmune for that is, selenium, right? That's like the main thing we see is selenium and vitamin D, right? And those obviously do more than just hypothyroidism, but he's got it in there in doses that are enough to get your vitamin D up. And keep in mind when you're looking at that, the immune genic, the regulations are different on that now, where we have to put those as like the metric units instead of the IUs.
Oh yeah, the vitamin D. Because they keep changing that. So
it looks like there's less.
It'll look like there's less. The percentage may seem less than before, even though we've added more because the government entity has decided that yes, in fact, we do need more vitamin D.
Mm-hmm.
And so the old levels are much lower than the new levels.
So we assure you there's more in there, but it's going to say in like the metric unit, it'll be smaller because those are, smaller units than like seeing an IU, which is thousands, right? So I think it's somewhere around 3,300 or something for the single dose, but that should be good to use as a key point in autoimmune protocol. Usually that one and then 2 of the microbiome products are your good bread and butter, and then we'll start adding things in later. Like if somebody had a methylation problem that would most likely affect this too, so we could add the methylgenic. And we'll go over at the end too protocols that are going to be useful for some of these DNA panels that we have made.
Okay, here we have 4 traits that are all of similar pathway, I guess is the best way to put it, or similar response types. So there's the acute respiratory distress syndrome that I mentioned, ARDS, sepsis, which is essentially bacteria in your blood, and impaired viral response. And that's kind of a catch-all for many different viruses that can invade the body, and then specifically tuberculosis. Here, there's really too many immune genes to list. You have your interleukins, there are tons. And if you look at some of these panels, they'll have long lists of potential mutations. 30, yeah. So again, on these ones, you might just want to trust that we have checked those out. NFE2L2 can cause oxidative stress in tissues. Interestingly, that's kind of the modern name. NFE2L2, some of you may recognize NRF2. That's the gene that actually produces that protein and leads is involved in that oxidative pathway. And then EGF, the epidermal growth factor, controls lung repair, lung fluid, again, related to viral clearance and essentially respiratory diseases.
Yeah, this one covers a lot.
There's not a ton extra to say. Either you fight off colds well or you don't do so well.
Yeah. We'll be through 4. This is 4. Technically, this is 4 panels on one slide. There's a tuberculosis, a viral response, sepsis, and ARDS, right? So your response to, viruses, your response to bacteria, right? Sepsis, your lung conditions, what are the genes of your lungs? How are they responding to viral, that's all in those panels. There's just so many genes that it's hard for, like Derek can go through all these genes that we'd be here for, put up the bed. We'd go back there and take a nap in a hammock.
I was going to say, we would probably space it out halfway through as well. So again, we've done kind of the mind-numbing work already, and now we just get to enjoy the results by just taking the DNA test and seeing where your problem areas may lie. Much easier, much quicker to look at the gene of interest or the trait of interest rather than trying to understand every single one of them.
Yeah, it's polygenomic. We're looking at all the genes and then your risk, and then you do also put them in order.
Oh yeah.
Like when they threw it together, they made sure that when you see those lists and you're looking at your genes from the top down, it's worst.
Yeah, if you start looking at your different clients' reports, you'll notice that it's not static, that those genes will move around. And that's because the most important gene in that person, or most important mutation, is listed first. The most impactful, I guess, is the term I'm looking for. Yeah, so keep that in mind when you start looking at like which gene is the most important that's causing this. It's the top one, followed by the second and the third. So that's kind of a nice little way to organize that and kind of know what's happening without having to have to deal with too many numbers and calculations and stuff like that.
If you have somebody that's having chronic sinus problems, chronic infections, why do I keep getting reinfected? And they don't want to keep going back to the doctor and keep taking, that'd be a good time to be like, okay, let's look at the genes. Let's look at their microbiome. There might be something awry in there, that their response to viruses and bacteria are a little odd, so they keep getting reinfected. A lot of times we'll see these genes in people that get infected with strep a lot. That was actually me, right? Strep, for some reason, I have genes that strep freaking loves me. And so we might be able to see that in somebody who takes this test.
All right. So I'm sure most people are aware of allergies or allergic reactions. This, again, is a function of your immune system. You may or may not have known that, but they range from getting puffy eyes or the sniffles to anaphylaxis, which is essentially severe shock, and you could end up dying from it. We don't have things on here like peanut allergy risk and things like that. Those are more on a case-by-case basis and acquired generally through interactions. We haven't quite figured out how those work genetically and how they're different. But we have identified many, many different genes that do interact with allergies and allergic reactions in general. So that's why, again, we listed immune genes. There's literally thousands of them. One specific flavor, though, is HLA. Those specifically are the antihistamine. They're related to antihistamine response. The human leukocyte antigen gene mutations can dysregulate the immune system and immune response. And then the other gene that we have highlighted here is AOC1, and that can contribute again to the histamine intolerance.
And I think AOC1 is actually, I know, especially for intestinal, because I think that one makes diamine oxidase. And then there's another gene that interacts with that one. It's called like HN something, because some genes activate other genes, right? And so, that would be a situation where we'd be able to see that. Keep in mind, this is just for environmental, because we haven't gone over later.
Seasonal allergies, is allergies in general. So there might be, like we had talked about, adding like a skin sensitivity panel or trait. I think some of those genes lie in here right now, and we'd have to kind of tease those out to make it more specific. But yeah, this is one that maybe you might already be aware of, but it's sometimes kind of nice to know, like, oh, so that's why I have coughing spells the first 3 weeks of October or something.
And we have the other types of food, like the lactose. We have a lactose one. It's in a different panel. It's still technically, I wouldn't really call it an allergy, more of like a sensitivity. This might be useful for maybe unsure about like the casein, maybe off the top of my head. I haven't delved too deep into that yet. That might be in there somewhere too. So there's more than just what we're looking at here. For something like this, though, it's very dynamic. And so we know from what we see being published in the microbiome that gut immune axis is absolutely critical for this. And we're talking genetics, and you would think they're two separate things, but he's actually working on the microbiome stuff right now. And so he's looking into stuff for like how the bacteria affect your genes and regulate your immune system, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, if you have kind of the basic form is that if you have the right bacteria, they kind of prime your immune system in the right way, so that it's kind of like exercising it. They're not harmful enough to cause a reaction, but they keep your immune system ready. And so you tend to respond to things a lot better. Whereas if you are lacking some of these bacteria that prime your immune system, the first time you run into something a lot nastier, either it doesn't know how to respond or it goes nuclear. One of the two. And neither one of the ones that what you want. So.
And Shane's talked to us a lot about this, and we'll probably get him to do a video on this, but he likes to talk about a lot of the new stuff coming out on peanut allergies. How you'll microdose that and work with the microbiome. As you slowly feed the microbiome things, they can do a lot of cool stuff that has to do with regulating your responses to some of these allergens. So look for a video. We're probably going to, I don't know when we're going to post that. It should be, now that we thought of it, we'll probably do it pretty quick. He throws this together, but look for that.
He does social media posts a lot, so he should probably have something about that.
Yeah, so follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, YouTube. Shameless plug. Shameless plug. That's he'll be on there, and we'll be posting more videos and Instagram posts, stuff like that. Oops.
Okay, so the next group of traits are autoimmune diseases that we have listed here: celiac disease, psoriasis, and lupus. So celiac disease, this is the scary form of gluten intolerance. So this isn't just like, oh, it makes me not feel good when I have wheat or gluten. This is like, I have to go to the hospital and almost die. So there are different. Celiac disease, I guess, is kind of just the extreme version of gluten intolerance, I guess. Mm-hmm. They function the same way. Your body is mistaking the gluten as self, and your immune system essentially starts attacking your own body. Same with psoriasis, that has to do with the skin. And lupus, generally it's called systemic, means that it attacks all over and it's sporadic and random, although there are certain things that it tends to do more often, like the joints and things like that. And again, we have our HLA. These are going to pop up a lot because they are kind of like the communication genes between the environment and your immune system. Mutations in them can cause reactions. Yeah, like I said, the consumption of gluten proteins, they trigger those. And the interleukin genes, again, that's a whole class. They just start listing them IL-1, IL-2. I can't remember how high it goes, but it's pretty high.
I can't remember all of them. There's so many.
And mutations in those, they mess up the balance. So if your IL-6 is too high or too low, they are kind of like a spider web where if one of them is out of whack, it will make 3 or 4 others or more out of whack. And that's difficult to figure out what's going on in a clinical way without knowing which gene is actually causing that problem. Mm-hmm. So yeah, these are important. I don't know how much you've dealt with it and asking them.
Mm-hmm. Well, celiac especially, and a lot of people already know, like obviously if you're celiac, we're not trying to, usually we don't try microdosing somebody with gluten for somebody that has actual celiac disease, because that's that immune system where we want to focus. And what we're trying to do is make it so if somebody did accidentally eat gluten, that they wouldn't die, right? We don't want them.
We do have this, we haven't covered it yet, but there is a gluten sensitivity trait in the nutritional panel, which we'll probably go over next time or the time after that. I don't know.
I think it's, yeah. So they're
related, but celiac is essentially the extreme form of gluten intolerance.
Yeah. And lupus, I've dealt a lot with lupus. Personally, I have friends that they themselves have lupus, and they'll work with me. And you can, like, for them, it's not like she's been totally cured, but she is in that situation where she feels like she doesn't have it. Or remission would be the word that I would say. Lupus is, I can't say how common that is, because lupus is, I'd say, one of the harder ones to work with. Like, it's just wreaks havoc on your life.
Something that you have to manage, and you'll hear people refer to flare-ups, which something that they did knowingly or unknowingly triggered an overreaction of their immune system, and they have to work to tamp it down, get it back under control. So unfortunately, that one is kind of a lifelong thing. Mm-hmm. There's no cure for that. But if you find what works for you, and it can be very helpful in managing the situation.
Very individualized, especially like when you're using our products and you do like an immune protocol. I definitely would recommend doing the protocol, but titrating first and starting with lower doses and working your way up. Because there are people that are allergic to things that you would deem as healthy, right? Sometimes they'll be like, oh, that's a health food, but they're allergic to it. So, and allergic, sensitive, right? They kind of run in the same category for lupus, right? You're reacting to everything. It's not fun. In the cases that I've seen, attacks the joints really fast and can kind of turn your hands into attacks themselves and stuff like that. So
rheumatoid arthritis.
Slow yourself down a little bit when you're doing the really, really intense autoimmune conditions. Like psoriasis, I've worked with, I don't want to name drop, but we've worked with actual practitioners that they themselves have, and we've been able to work with getting their skin back into a healthy state. And that was with the hormone protocol. And we like the hormone protocol because, we have all these genes, but when we do the full protocol, we're hitting these genes plus 500, 600 others of them. And we're just trying to blanket all of those genes with this protocol. The immunogenic, immune superfood, immune eubiomic, we'll do the methylgenic. We have these products that we put as usually about 5 a month, and we'll take that for 3 months and see how that responds. And it works pretty good because we're hitting so many genes, working on the microbiome. We're trying to cover everything that we can get a hint at from these tests, and eventually the microbiome test we'll be able to do more.
And then our last trait here that we're looking at, there's actually 3 of them related to COVID-19. We're not going to get into politics or conspiracies, but essentially right now, I would say it's closer to a flu-like disease. And there were essentially millions and millions and millions of dollars poured into research. So suddenly we know a lot about this and how your genes interact with it. So you can tell if this might help you understand why your family got COVID, you felt deathly ill for a week and a half, and then your significant other had a runny nose for a day. They're still figuring that stuff out. Unfortunately, I know this will probably come up with questions, so I'm just going to say it now. We don't have any information on long COVID yet. That's, again, because it's long COVID. They haven't had the time to get those studies in yet. So we'll be interested when they do.
We have educated guesses. We just don't until we have the actual raw data to pull from. But some of the stuff that we're going to do for this would most likely help a long COVID patient. And this, I always call this the C word. It's kind of a swear word in who you don't know if you should bring it up. You should not. It's almost like politics. I know that when I work with people, I have done a lot of work with long COVID patients, and we do the same recommendations that this comes back for. Plus, we'll do a lot of enzymes, serapepsidase. I said that, I probably butchered that, but there's different enzymes you can take. There's a lot of stuff you hear about the spike protein, what we can do about that. So this test is really good to give us hints at that. And if you really want more information on that type of stuff, I would reach out to a rep, or Jack Tips. He's in the chat. He can give you his contact information. Anytime you want to talk to me, or if you want information from Derek, we can get you stuff to give us the information. You don't have to give us names of the patient or the client, but you can say, hey, they're this old, they weigh this much, this is what they're seeing. Because everyone's individual, and we'll take that information and give you a custom protocol for somebody that's got COVID-19 long. Just let us know. We'll work with you on that.
Yeah. And again, you'll see on the slide, HLA genes, shockingly. Again, these are the genes that deal with the immune system and how it interacts with your body. So yeah, that's probably what I will talk about COVID. I think that's the end of the hormone management and immune panels. If you want to talk a bit about some of the products that you mentioned throughout this.
Mm-hmm. And this is just what keep an eye out. We're going to start having kits come out where they're pre-made kits. They'll come in boxes. This isn't set in stone. So this is what we threw together before this. We might have more, because Shane's releasing new products. We have a bunch coming out that we might add to this. We might pull some out. But we're trying to create these full-on custom protocols that can go for each of these categories. And even if you didn't take a DNA test, this protocol you could use for somebody because you would know, okay, I know the immune system is lupus, so here's the immune protocol, and you can take the protocol there and use it for that person. But these two, the one on the left is the immune protocol, whereas remember before we were talking about the microbiome and how those are so intricately connected. And eventually, like I said, he'll have a test he's working on right now. I'm actually really excited. I don't want to say too much because I get overzealous, but
we get in trouble when we start getting too excited about things.
Yes. So I'm not going to tell you more about it, but we're going to have that for you. But you'll see in that protocol, there is that immunogenic I talked about before, which I was saying is more as kind of a staple to cover all of the dietary recommendations that someone would need for their immune system, and they're in pretty therapeutic doses. The immune eubiomic is a probiotic. It has ones that we already know of, like lactose and bifidose, a transient species. And then we have the keystone species, which is what makes us special. That's what makes Alimentum stand apart from the rest of the industry, is those keystone species in the eubiomic are known for regulating the immune system. The immune superfood feeds that. It feeds the eubiomic. It's a prebiotic that feeds the probiotic. So probiotic is the immune eubiomic. The prebiotic is immune superfood. And those work together to create a bunch of cool metabolites, grow a bunch of different bugs, because we're correcting the gut immune axis, right?
Right, and those superfoods are excellent at filling in nutritional gaps as well, because a lot of the sources that these bugs feed on, like the modern diet, just doesn't have them, and nobody's really excited to eat some of those ingredients anymore, or maybe ever. What are some of that? There's some odd ones in there.
They've taken, because fiber isn't a fiber. There's fiber types, right? Yeah. Mucins, there's pectins, oligos. What Shane has done is he's taken a mixture of all these cool prebiotics, and some of them aren't even like elagitannins. Those are in the neuro, and that feeds urolithin bacteria. It feeds prosnutzi, or I don't know if it directly feeds prosnutzi, but he's put in a bunch of ingredients. So a lot of phytochemicals.
Yeah, and the special part about that, like, yeah, it's like fiber is fiber. I mean, technically, cellulose wood is fiber. Yeah, it's not useful.
Yeah.
So the fiber from an apple, way better for you. Fiber from other ingredients, certain like the brassica, so the broccolis, the kales, stuff that I'm sure some of you like to eat, but I would say 90% of the population does not. It's an easy way to have it every day. You'll see lots of these companies now coming out with like green products, or, oh, just take this once a day and you're covered. It's kind of the same thing, except for these are specifically formulated for their
the immune system,
their immune system. Well, and for those bugs that help the immune system that we talked about.
And keep in mind, even though we do target the immune system, there's so much overarch in these products that, okay, yeah, you're taking the prebiotic and the probiotic for the immune system, but those bacteria also affect like the gut-brain axis. We've just keyed in on what our approach is in there with the formula and the bacterial species that we've chosen. But one bacteria can do a lot of different things, like just your lactose and bifidose alone. Some of them make GABA, right? So even though we're using them here to cross-feed and do a lot of good stuff for the general microbiome, it's still working on your mental health because it's helping you produce GABA, right? Which is going to help your nervous system and relaxing and stuff like that. The methylgenic too. This is actually cool. The methylgenic and how we've been using these genetic products. This is why we call it a holobiome approach. This genetic products that we're taking will affect the microbiome indirectly. So as we look at your genes and kind of manipulate your genes, we're able to change your microbiome with that, while at the same time, we're taking your microbiome and manipulating the microbiome, because that microbiome also affects your genes. So it's this delicate dance that we like to do. And Derek can be a poster boy for the superfoods, because he actually was one of the guys that helped to flavor it. And before we didn't have flavorings, and thankfully he came up.
As I say, if you think they don't taste good, you should have tried them before. Like I said, a lot of these phytochemicals and beneficial fibers are extremely bitter. Or he talked about elagitannins. Tannin is essentially comes from the word of bitter. So we tried to make them moderately delicious, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah. We get a lot of compliments on the Terra. So that one I know for a fact, and I drink that one every day. So
a lot of these are new, and they'll be out. You'll be more familiar with them soon. Looks like we got about a little less than 10 minutes, so let's see if we had any questions right here.
I want to stop the screen share, but I don't want to. Okay, I thought I was going to turn off the whole thing when I was turning off the screen share. There's the Q&A.
Okay.
Have you used DHA to support adrenal insufficiency? Yes, it is. It's one of those delicate balances, though. Figuring out the right dose. And sometimes you want to try what you can naturally first. Theoretically, you could consider it a exogenous hormone, which is why some of them.
It's one of those things where you'll feel better pretty quickly, but in a while it will stop working. So
depending on your dose. It's like testosterone. When you take testosterone, especially when it's super physiological, usually in lower doses, you'll be fine with feedbacks. But like you get guys take steroids, right? That they're shut off, and then they do what's called a PCT, or post-cycle therapy, when they're done to try to get their stuff all working again. And so you probably won't have that situation happening in the doses that are in supplements. So don't worry that much, but also realize that it is a hormone, that it is still something that's really good to figure out the right. It's Goldilocks it, like I was saying before, figure out what the specific doses. And if you want help with that, remember Jack Tips? He's in the chat. His email, by the way, for everybody, if you want to email Jack Tips clinical questions, and then another way you can get your questions answers by reaching out to your rep, and we'll be able to get you answers. If we have to go to Jack, or if we have, Derek answer a DNA question, we can get those to you as well. So however you want to get your answers, just reach out to us. All right. Can you tell us what the red dot means when found next to one of the SNPs on the panel report?
Yeah. So this is a new feature. We need to get the legend out there to help people understand what this means. But we talked about earlier that they are now ordered in impact, and you'll notice that those red dots are going to be always at the top there. That just means that they're above a certain threshold where they're extra impactful, I guess you could say. I think statistically they double your risk, is what we have cut that off out right now.
Mm-hmm. All right. So this one has to do with the COVID panel. And she is right. We put all of those into the same, when we were doing the slides, I threw all of the COVID ones onto one slide.
Yeah.
Because they all have information, but.
So these were from big government studies on what these different things did. And so most of the genes behave very similarly, but some of them have more influence on if you get really, really sick, or if you are just tend to get infected often. So in the trait descriptions, they'll describe what the differences are between them. But in general, it just kind of is, how susceptible are you to COVID? And then it kind of outlines a bit of the specificity.
Mm-hmm.
So is the optimal blood labs on vitamin D still around 80?
So that one, since it's always imagine vitamin D like a hormone, because it kind of is, right? UVB hits the skin, cholesterol, right? It comes this, creation of, vitamin D, and then it gets activated. So there's a lot of moving pieces with vitamin D that I would treat it similar to how you would a hormone, right? It's technically, like if we look at testosterone, you would think 400, 800. If I'm anywhere in that range, I'm a normal person. But like we were just saying, even though you're in those ranges, you might not feel good. That might not be the right dose for you. That might not be, it might have to be either raised or lowered. Same with vitamin D. There are recommendations for it, but if they're at that right recommended level and they don't feel good still, you might want to look into other.
But as far as what we had stated earlier, the changes on the amounts as listed as recommended for supplementation by the FDA, they didn't change what would be considered optimal by blood labs.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So they're kind of different.
I want to find out who is my
rep and how to reach out.
Oh, so if you want to figure out who your rep is, just you can go to info@systemicformulas.com, or you can call customer service at 1-800-445-4647. And then whoever answers the phone, you just say, hey, who's my rep? And they can literally get you in contact with your rep and we'll get you over the email with all their contact information. So simple as just let us know. Take care of you.
Can you please explain superpower again? So that one's just essentially saying that compared to the rest of the population, you are genetically the least likely to have this trait. That's essentially what it is. It's not like you're immune. Like if you had a superpower for obesity, it doesn't mean you could eat whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted, forever. But yeah, so it's mostly just showing how genetically likely you are to have that trait. And in the case of a superpower, very unlikely genetically. You can use your environment to overcome pretty much any genetics if you try hard enough.
Yeah, if you got good eye genes, you're not going to start shooting lasers out of your eye.
Right.
But you'll be able to withstand some of the common worries of human nature. Do you have plans to make reports printable or savable in a different format?
We are working on that. There is kind of they've created a bit of a shortcut fix right now where if you go to print it, it now no longer will cut off in the middle of a snip and make it unreadable. The last one that I tried, it was 140 pages long. So be careful what you wish for on that a little bit. But if you open a specific panel and then you can, instead of printing it, save as a PDF, and you can save that as a PDF. It won't look quite as pretty as the website, but it is all intelligible and fairly usable that way. And we're hoping to maybe make it prettier later on.
And you can also whoever your rep is too, if you have their DNA file, keep in mind, no one's name is on these DNA files. So if you download their DNA file, because when you read your DNA, if you scroll to the bottom, you can download a file, and that file you can send to me. Derek can look at it. But what we do is we send it to that recommender, and I can send you back that information. And if you want to, you can request me or the rep to do that printing part for you, because I can read the DNA there and I can do all that printing for you and just open them all up and send you the PDF file on my end too. So if it becomes, some technical difficulties on that, just let us, let us know.
I know that when they used to try and print it, it looked horrible and it wouldn't work. So at least it technically will print now, but it is, it's not perfect, but we're working on it still.
And when you do these tests, you get infinite upgrades. Because normally when you buy a DNA test from a DNA company, they'll give, some freebies here, freebies there, but they'll normally try to put you in it's called an LTV funnel, right? To try to reconvert an already existing customer to buy another panel, right? I don't want to name drop, but there's sometimes where they'll be like, hey, here's your DNA, but also we have an ancestry here, but you have to pay for that. Even though they already have your genes, something like that we won't be doing, because we're working with in a clinical setting. And as we learn stuff through the DNA, we're just going to add it. And next time you pop into your DNA, you'll see more genes there or new panels and stuff like that. So don't worry about any of these things being, hindered by a paywall or something like that, because it will be included in the one cost. You get it once, you're done, and you'll, have your DNA and get infinite upgrades. Another thing that I don't know how close this is in the future. It's, I almost probably shouldn't say this, but I know we are going to make it so that eventually you could take your raw file and send it to, like, if you want to take your raw file, send it to a different company. I don't know how far down the road that is, but
yeah, we're exploring that. The problem is right now is that our file is about 1,000 times bigger than a 23andMe file. So it makes it hard to download, share, move over internet, stuff like that. So we'll see on that part, but we will be sending out emails, notifications when we do make updates to the test, so you can check out any new information that's on it.
Yeah, we'll keep you in the loop. Just, hang around with us and we'll keep sending you over some cool stuff. And then also, by the way, let me pull up, make sure my screen again. I want to put up the socials for you guys. And I also want to let you guys know about some deals going on right now for the holidays, because it is almost Christmas. Good time to get healthy, right? Happy and healthy for the holidays, so that you don't get to the family function and feel sickly, right? You want to enjoy yourself. So the next one that we're doing, by the way, glad I pulled this up. The next one is on December 19th, and we're going to be doing the next, I guess this one's kind of inflammation. There's two of them that are inflammation. So we'll do another one on inflammation that has some other categories that we really like. And then we'll go through the neurocognitive panel. This one's a milestone. So make sure to tune in for this one because this one has changed a lot of lives. And I know for a fact, I've done it myself. It is extremely useful, the information that we give you in here, because it's really nice to see what your serotonin genes are doing, what your dopamine genes are doing, what your GABA genes are doing, because we want to fix that delicate dance as well. So tune in for that. You're going to love that. This will be posted on YouTube. And then that's the YouTube right there. That's like, and you could just look, when you get on YouTube, if you just type in Elementum Labs, you should be able to find this. But that's the exact username or whatever for the YouTube there. And then join us on Instagram, Facebook. Shane has his own Instagram as well, where he just strictly talks science. So if you're into that and you love hearing about the next newest, greatest thing coming out in science, he'll usually talk about it. He has a lot of cool stories about what they do in the lab, some of the research that's going on. Tune into that. That's his tag there. And then that private group, we have a group where it's a bunch of you guys all together in one spot. I love this group. A lot of people have become great friends, close friends through there. They love spitting ideas off each other, how they can run their practice, how they can grow their practice, how they're doing split testing, how we're doing marketing. It's really good to get in that private group and hang out. I see it. I see a lot of the stuff in there, so I can answer. Jack Tips is in there. So if you want to talk to Jack Tips directly, you don't want to call him, you don't want to reach out to his email. If you do it in the Facebook group, he monitors that as well. So tune into that as well. And then for the holiday special, when you're ordering online, there is the coupon code, and it goes from now until December 31st. Code is holiday10. And so make sure to put that in. You'll get 10% off of a single order. And so if you want to call me for this, I can give you some ideas of what would be good to do for the holidays, or let's say someone wanted it for a gift or has something going on with their health. I can talk to you about that and talk to your rep. We can figure out what we can get them, and you can get 10% off on that single order. But anything else that we can think of for DNA, let me check and see if there's any more questions.
I think there's quite a bit more, but we're
running low on time here. So we're about 6 minutes over, but I see your questions here. All of these too. And I know I can actually answer all of these. So yeah, perfect. So anybody who put those questions in there, we'll email them out to you. It was really nice talking to you guys. Keep in touch. Give us calls, email us, whatever you guys need. You let us know. We'll take care of you. And we'll see you on the next one on December 19th. Okay, guys?
Yeah, thanks.
Take care.